Have you ever just found a game without influence from advertisements? When you just find something on the store and decide to give it a chance? That's pretty much what happened with me in Monster Sanctuary. Monster Sanctuary has been out for a while now in early access on Steam, but it released on consoles on December 8th, and I discovered it just the day before. Monster Sanctuary is a Metroidvania with monster taming as a core mechanic. You play as a new monster keeper who lives in the Monster Sanctuary, a world separated from what's called the Old World, where monsters still live. But you're not just any monster tamer. You have special protagonist privileges, and therefore you get a spiffy starting monster because of your bloodline. The plot starts out almost non-existent. There are strong champion monsters out there, and you should go fight them to raise your rank as a monster tamer. That way you can take down stronger champions. Eventually though, a group of shady alchemists get thrown into the mix. Honestly, the plot never gets too interesting, even at the end, but that's not much of a problem because the gameplay is where this game really shines. Gameplay can be divided into two parts: combat and exploration. Both of these revolve around the monsters you tame. At the start of the game you can choose one of 4 monsters to pick as your starter. The canon choice is a wolf, but I went with the eagle since I'm a member of the best country of the world, America. You can travel with one monster on the overworld. This isn't just cosmetic. Most of the power-ups in this game come in the forms of monsters you can tame. And by most, I mean every power-up but 2, and I'd argue just 1. For example, the eagle I started out with gave me the ability to hover a bit in the air, while the other 3 can break walls, cut down vines, and move blocks. There are a lot of different abilities granted by monsters, although many of them just flip elementally charged switches. Some of the monsters let you swim in the water, some can be used as mounts to move faster, and some let you avoid enemies altogether. When you run into a group of monsters, combat begins. Combat against wild monsters is 3 on 3, although you can use one of your monster's turns to swap it out for another party member. One of the main features of combat is the combo system. Almost every action in the game is a combination of weaker versions of that action. For every action, be it a hit, heal, or buff, the damage dealt for the rest of that turn goes up by 5%. That means in addition to choosing who to use in combat, you also have to consider what order the monsters move in. At the end of combat, you're rated on 5 aspects: the difficulty of the enemy, how many turns it took to beat them, how healthy your monsters are at the end of combat, how many buffs and debuffs you applied, and how well you use the combo system. The better you do, the more likely you'll get a drop from the rare pool, which includes the eggs you'll need to tame new monsters. While there's a large number of monsters you can have with you at a time, you can only have 6 active monsters ready to fight. A lot of the fun in this game is experimenting to see what works for you. As of the time of writing this is the team I use. I won't spoil how it works, but if you played the game you probably have a good idea of what it does. Each monster comes with their own skill tree for you to invest in. These skill trees cover many different types of abilities, but you won't be able to completely fill any monster's tree, so you'll have to think carefully about what role a monster fills on your team. Take Mega Rock for example. Mega Rock learns hard-hitting neutral attacks, powerful single-target fire and wind attacks, earth attacks that can create a shield and never miss, and the ability to guard an ally or create shields for the party. Once again, Mega Rock can't do them all at once. In my case, I chose to completely give up on fire and wind coverage to focus on making Mega Rock a tank, investing in his defensive abilities. But there are a lot of other things you need to consider besides skill trees. You can feed your monsters to buff various attributes, and you can give them equipment to boost their stats and occasionally give them new passive abilities. But most importantly, there's shifting. Once you finish a certain section of the game, you'll be able to shift your monster towards either the light or the dark. Doing so unlocks new powerful perks for your monster, as well as a large buff in stats. Generally, I noticed that monsters tend to have to choose between really high stats or an amazing passive. Take Ashura for example. While shifting towards dark only gives a small amount of mana, it gives a much more useful ability to wield 2 weapons at once. On the other hand, shifting towards light gives a large amount of stats, but Holy Presence, the ability you get, isn't all that useful from my experience. There are 101 different monsters in the game, which might sound small by today's standard. After all, even the original Pokemon had more monsters in this game. But there's one big differentiating factor. Every single monster, from the first blob you tame to the post-game exclusive champions, have their strengths, and they can all fill a slot on your team, even through the post-game. While some monsters can evolve, it's never a direct upgrade. Rocky is one of the first monsters you can recruit, and near the endgame it can evolve into Mega Rock, who I already talked about. While Mega Rock has the stats to function as a better tank, Rocky is able to learn the Restore line of spells, which are very valuable since they're the only way to cleanse debuffs, and they're one of the few healing spells in the game. Because of this, and the previously mentioned abilities the monsters grant, you'll naturally want to tame every monster available to you. Not just for some pointless reward at the end of things, but because you want to see what each monster can do, both in and outside of combat. Occasionally while exploring you'll come across a champion monster. These are souped up monsters that can attack multiple times in one turn to balance out the fact that the fight is 3-on-1. Like with normal encounters, you'll be graded on how well you did at the end, and if you get a 5-star ranking you get an egg of the champion monster, or the item that allows another monster to evolve into the champion. And if you get a poor ranking, you can have a rematch with them at any time in the Sanctuary Tower. Speaking of the Sanctuary Tower, that's where the Infinity Arena is. The Infinity Arena is a series of battles where every win raises the level of the opponents you fight. In addition, the Infinity buff, a large attack boost that usually only shows up if a boss fight is taking too long, is applied every turn. If you're half decent at the game, it won't be long before you're fighting enemies well over the level cap. It's fun to try to overcome these massive obstacles, although eventually you'll just be one-shot, which doesn't feel so great. So far we've only covered ways to fight wild monsters, but there are also fights against other monster tamers in the game. In these fights, the 3 other monsters in your battle party will fill in once the monster in the field dies. The goal is to defeat all 6 of the opponent's monsters. Against the computer, you'll always go first, but against other players it's random who goes first. The person who does go first can only have 2 other monsters act on the first turn as a balance measure. This game has online PvP, and there are even leaderboards. Unfortunately though, I can't comment much on this due to a lack of experience. Most of the time I get immediately disconnected and I get some message about the battle going out of sync. The times I don't get that, I either wait for a really long time with no one showing up, or somebody does show up but the battle never starts. I talked to somebody on the Discord about it, but they told me all they could say was the staff was looking into it. This game doesn't have crossplay, but from what I heard, the Switch and Steam versions of the game might have the most active online community. The graphics are fine, I guess. They remind me a lot of Terraria, but nothing really stands out. The music is also pretty okay. There are some good tracks in there, like the Infinity Arena and Alchemist battle theme, but nothing in it is especially great. One thing that holds this game back a bit is the sudden difficulty spike. On paper, this shouldn't even exist. The game will scale to your level, and while monsters are pretty tough from the first time you enter an area, by the end they should be steamrolled along. The real problem lies with the bosses of areas, or should I say the boss. One of the alchemists you fight wears a light blue cloak and goes by the name of Zaldamoth. He's basically a super boss in the guise of a flunky. His strategy is to wear you down with Acid Tempest, a hard-hitting attack that can, and I mean will, lower your defense, with the added possibility, and by possibility I mean definite, chance of clearing your buffs. You fight him a second time late in the game, and the only notable change to his strategy is that he now employs the age buff, which boosts his monster's stats over time. The final boss and some of the post-game champions are also pretty nasty, but given their status I suppose that's to be expected. There are also a few nitpicks I have. Like for example, when you select the monster in your reserve and not in your active party, the switch monster button jumps to the monsters in your party, not the next monster in reserve. Also, if you lose to the final boss, there's a fair distance you have to travel to get back to the room the boss is in. Of course, I never lost to the final boss, but it's something I heard about. Overall though, Monster Sanctuary is really good. The gameplay is amazing, and I love how exploration and combat have been tied together. I just wish I could play online, but hopefully that will be fixed soon.